All right, so let's get started. Hey everyone, my name is Conor Duncan. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Director of Community Partnerships at Kensington Park Senior Living. And if you've joined us before, welcome back to Kensington Connect. And if you are new, hello and welcome. We're so excited to have you. And today we have a really special session. It's our third session. And it's going to be The Genius of Vincent Van Gogh. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with him and his artwork, but we have two special guests today to present. We've got Kate Moeller and Ashley Lorello, who are our activity coordinators here at Kensington Park. Give me 1 second. All right, hi ladies, how are you doing? There you go. Hello.
Welcome everyone. We're so happy to have all of you here.
That's right. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Kate. And we're going to talk a little bit today about the life, the legacy, the genius of Vincent Van Gogh. And we're also going to show you how you can make your very own Vincent Van Gogh masterpiece. So shall we get started with seeing the process?
Yes. So today we are going to do our best to make Vincent Van Gogh's Almond Blossoms. We'll show you a picture of what it really looks like in just a moment. But first, I'll tell you a little bit about the background of this painting. It's quite beautiful. It may not be what comes to mind when you think of Vincent Van Gogh, but it has a lot of significance in his life. He painted this in 1890 as a gift to his nephew, who would share his name as well. He would also be a Vincent Van Gogh. And it is one of the few paintings that the family never sold, and they just held on to it because it was so special. So today, I'm going to be lightly guiding you through a general painting quest. But because we are on a little bit of a time crunch, I'm going to go ahead and start with an entirely blue background. If you're doing this at home, you want the edges to be a little bit darker, the center to be a little bit lighter just as a focal point. You can use any blue of your choosing. Just mix a little white or even a little yellow to get that turquoise color in the middle. If you are painting along, I would recommend using a filbert brush, if you can see that. It's a little bit rounded at the top. It's my preferred brush, but you can paint with whatever you want. I like my brushes like I like my donuts, round. So I've also outlined kind of where I'm going. I don't know if you can see, with a little bit of a chalk outline, because as I paint, I will paint over it and it will disappear with water, but at least gives me a general direction for painting a Van Gogh in 30 minutes. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Kate.
Yeah, because I have the easy job. I don't have to do a masterpiece in 35 minutes.
Hey, I wanted to say, so we already have gotten some comments on your beautiful dress. So would you want to share a little bit more about your dress? Because we had some chat about that.
A dress with a print, if you can see it, of Vincent Van Gogh's Starry Night, what is essentially considered to be one of his, if not his greatest masterpiece. This is able to be purchased on Amazon, just like everything else. And I actually, believe it or not, owned this before I decided to do this presentation with my friend Ashley here.
Awesome.
So it just goes to show how much his legacy still continues today, that someone like me in 2021 owns a dress with his painting on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, so Conor, shall we go to the presentation? Okay, and one more forward, that's perfect. All right, oh, one back, please. Perfect. So here we have a self-portrait of Vincent Van Gogh. He lived from 1853 to 1890. There are quite a few self-portraits of Vincent Van Gogh. I'm sure you've seen many of them. Mostly because he couldn't afford models, so he just painted himself. So I picked one of the many here just to sort of show. So he was born March 30th, his birthday's coming up, in 1853 in Rood-Schoendert, Netherlands. His father, Theodorus Van Gogh. He was an austere country minister. And his mother, Anna Cornelia Carbentus, she was a very moody artist. Very moody. Wonder where Vincent got it. She loved nature and drawing and watercolors, and that was certainly transferred to her son. So Anna and Theodorus did have a son that was stillborn, on the exact same birthday as our Vincent Van Gogh. And he was also named Vincent Van Gogh. Yes, so exactly 1 year to the day of their son being stillborn, they had our Vincent Van Gogh. And so growing up, the Van Gogh family with his mother, they would go to the cemetery and paint together at his brother's gravestone.
Oh my gosh.
So growing up as a young boy, seeing a gravestone with his name and his birthday led, of course, to a very melancholy young Van Gogh.
I can imagine. That sounds rough. I have to say though, as we were talking about the family, I did happen to learn that there were 4 Vincent Van Goghs. So we have Vincent Van Gogh, the painter.
Mhm.
We have his grandfather. We have the nephew.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so a whole bunch of Vincent Van Goghs out there.
There's 4 of them.
Yep.
All right, now Connor, if you could advance to the next slide. Perfect. So Vincent Van Gogh on the left here, that's one of the very few photographs we have of him. He was the eldest of 6 living children. He had 2 younger brothers. The one was Theo, who we see on the right here. He ended up becoming Vincent's confidant, best friend, art dealer as well. And then another younger brother, Cor, and 3 younger sisters, Anna, Elizabeth, and Wilhelmine. So Theo Van Gogh, of course, would later play a very important role in his brother's life. We're going to hear quite a bit more about Theo as we continue learning about his life. So at age 15, Van Gogh's family was struggling financially, and he was forced to leave school and go to work. He got a job at his uncle Cornelius's art dealership in The Hague, and by this time, Van Gogh was fluent in French, German, and English, as well as his native Dutch. Very bright young man.
Wow.
Yeah. So in June of 1873, Van Gogh was transferred to his family's gallery in London. There he fell in love with English culture. He visited art galleries in his spare time. He also became a fan of the writings of Charles Dickens and George Eliot. He also fell in love with his landlady's daughter.
How'd that work out?
Right, not so well for him. She rejected his marriage proposal, and he suffered a breakdown. He threw away all of his books,
Oh no.
except for the Bible, and decided he was going to devote his life to God. He became very angry at work. He was telling customers at the art gallery not to buy the worthless art.
Oh.
So, of course, he did not stay so long at the art gallery. He was eventually fired. So if you could advance, Connor. Perfect. So in the fall of 1880, Van Gogh decided to move to Brussels and become an artist. He had failed at just about everything he had tried in life so far. He tried to be a teacher, that didn't work out. He tried to be a minister. In love, he was sort of failing as well. So the one thing he was always quite good at, of course, was art. So he decided to pursue a career in art. He had no formal art training at this time, but his brother Theo offered to support Van Gogh financially because he knew how talented his brother was. And Van Gogh's art, of course, helped to keep him a little bit more emotionally balanced for a time, of course. And in 1885, while living in Paris with his brother, he began work on what is considered to be his very first masterpiece, and that is called The Potato Eaters. If Conor could advance to the next slide. So his brother Theo was living in Paris with him, and he did not think that this painting would be well received in Paris. The Impressionists were all the rage, and those were bright, colorful, lively, happy paintings. So this was not well received in its day, not even a little bit. But it is considered one of his early masterpieces. Van Gogh strove to depict the people and their lives truthfully. He renders the scene in a very dull palette, echoing the drab living conditions of the peasants. And he even used ugly models to further iterate the effects of manual labor on these workers. The effect is heightened, of course, by his use of very loose brush strokes to describe the hands and the faces of the peasants. They're sort of huddled around this one singular lantern, and they have this meager meal of potatoes. So at the time this work was painted, the Impressionists had really dominated the Parisian avant-garde for over a decade with their much lighter palettes. It is not surprising that Van Gogh's brother Theo found it pretty impossible to sell his paintings from this period in his brother's career. But I particularly love The Potato Eaters. It, to me, really demonstrates Van Gogh's commitment to rendering emotionally laden scenes in his artwork.
Yeah, and I also like it's so different, and I like the truth that he was seeking, like not to make it out as though these people were living the high life.
Right.
It seems very honest.
Absolutely.
I like it.
All right, Conor, if you could go to the next one. All right. So while in Paris, Van Gogh was exposed to a myriad of artistic styles, including Japanese woodblock prints. These were newly available in the mid-19th century in the West, and Japanese style and Asian art swept Paris by storm. Van Gogh was inspired to create this particular painting by a reproduction of a print that appeared on a May 1886 magazine, actually. Van Gogh enlarges this image of the courtesan there in the center with a contrasting golden background. And she is bordered by a lush water garden, which is populated by frogs and cranes, both of which are allusions to prostitutes in French slang.
Which I really like that he included because, well, that came off completely wrong. Because at the time, prostitutes were often used as models. And so I find it interesting, a little tongue in cheek, that he would include that group, even if he wasn't painting them directly.
Absolutely.
A little nod to what was going on at the time.
Yeah, a lot of his contemporaries, if you're familiar with Manet and his masterpiece Olympia, a lot of his contemporaries were painting prostitutes as models because they were what they could afford as a model.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So the I'm sorry, Conor, thank you. The stylistic features that are exhibited in this painting, in particular, if you look at the very strong, dark outlines and the bright, really broad swaths of color, those really came to define Van Gogh's mature style. But he, of course, made this work his own. He worked in paint, of course, rather than woodblock prints. And so Van Gogh really softened the painting with his visible brush strokes, and it really gives a dimension to the figure and her surroundings.
Yeah, and as you mentioned with the Japanese influence, Europe had really been cut off, for the most part, with a few exceptions, from Japan for about 200 years. Japan had been really turned off by the Christianity that they were trying to push on the Japanese. So they pretty much closed their borders until about 1853 when Commodore Perry came through. So now that we had this open trade route, this influx of Japanese items from like silks to art for sure, really appealed to, as you mentioned, Monet and Van Gogh and Toulouse-Lautrec and all of those guys that we just love. So kind of a cool time in art history.
It's amazing. It was like the art coming out of Japan and Asia and as a whole really was like a breath of fresh air in Europe. And we see so many artists inspired from it. Everyone from Tiffany and Company, even all the way down to people like Van Gogh. Awesome. All right, Connor, the next slide, please. All right. So Van Gogh became so influenced by Japanese art. He began studying Eastern philosophy and wanted to use everything Eastern to enhance his art and his life. He dreamed of traveling there, but he was actually told by Toulouse-Lautrec that the light in the village of Arles, France, was just like the light in Japan.
Okay, all right.
So in February of 1888, Van Gogh boarded a train to the south of France to go where the light was just like Japan. So he moved into the now famous Yellow House, and he began spending his money on paint rather than food. So this was one of the first scenes Van Gogh painted during his stay in Arles. And it's the first painting where he uses a nocturnal background. He uses very contrasting colors and tones. And Van Gogh here really achieves a luminous surface that really pulses with almost an interior light. The light is coming from within the painting, glowing outwards, and almost in defiance of the darkening sky. So the lines of the composition as well all point to the center of the work. It draws the viewer's eye almost along the pavement like you're walking down those cobblestone streets yourself. This cafe does still exist today.
Really?
Yes. And it is a mecca for Van Gogh fans to come and sort of experience Van Gogh while visiting the south of France. So Van Gogh painted this from observation. That's a practice that he inherited from the Impressionists. Impressionists are known for going out in plein air and painting what they see. And Van Gogh, in his earlier career, was doing that quite a bit. So this is from his direct observation. And I do think that really helps give this sense of excitement. You can almost get a feel for how excited he was to be there. Just from the brush strokes, it really just leaps off of the canvas.
There's so much life in this picture, even though the people aren't really prominent. It feels like you're in the middle of like Times Square. Like there's just this energy about it. It's really striking.
Absolutely.
I love it.
All right, Connor, the next one, please. Okay. So we do, of course, know Van Gogh and his sunflowers. In December 1888, Van Gogh was living on coffee, bread, and absinthe in France. And he found himself feeling sick and strange.
Really?
Yeah.
Shocking.
Yes. Not the best diet for a healthful life. So before long, it became apparent to his brother, Theo, that in addition from maybe suffering from physical illness, his psychological health was also declining. Around this time, Van Gogh was also known to have been sipping on his turpentine that he washed his brushes with, and also eating his paint. So Theo offered fellow artist Gauguin money to move in with Van Gogh in Arles to help keep an eye on him.
You know what? Theo seems like a really good guy.
Theo will pop up again and again as his brother's biggest champion and supporter.
I like
Absolutely. So Van Gogh painted his Sunflower series to decorate the room that Gauguin was going to be staying at in the yellow house. So these lush brush strokes and the built-up texture of the sunflowers, Van Gogh employed a wide spectrum of yellows to describe these blossoms, due in part, of course, to recent inventions of new pigments that were now widely available. And so he could get these newer colors and nuance of tone. Van Gogh used these sunny hues to express the entire lifespan of a sunflower in one painting. So we go from the full bloom in bright yellow to the wilting and the dying blossoms in these more muted ochre yellow colors. This traditional painting of a vase of flowers is given new life through Van Gogh and sort of experimentation with color and line and texture. And he really, to me, infuses each flower with that sort of fleeting nature of life, and as well with his own melancholy nature.
Yeah. Can I tell you a secret?
Yes.
I don't like sunflowers, but I like this painting.
Yeah.
It's charming.
Yeah, this one I think really speaks to a lot of people. As a little girl, I would go to the Philadelphia Museum of Art with my parents. I'm from Philadelphia originally, the suburbs, and they have one of the sunflowers there. And I would always love to go visit it, I would say.
Oh.
So this has always had a particular soft spot in my heart. All right, Connor, the next one, please. Okay. So Van Gogh's The Bedroom depicts his living quarters in the little house known as the Yellow House. It's, of course, one of his most well-known images. He labored over this subject matter, the colors, the arrangements of the composition. He wrote many letters to his brother Theo about it. In one letter, he does say to his brother, it is to be suggestive here of rest or sleep in general. In a word, looking at the picture ought to rest the brain, or rather the imagination. With these bright yellow hues and the blues, you do get a sense of disquiet. But it also, with such bright colors, does sort of evoke a sunny, cheerful day and sort of a sense of warmth and calm like Van Gogh intended. But there is a bit of a funhouse effect to it as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it's a beautiful painting. I'm not sure if it invokes calm in me. The funhouse element, I definitely see. And the chairs aren't pushed in. There's a few things that I think my mother would yell at me about. So, but other than that, it's maybe that has a reflection on his mental state, that for him, maybe this was very calm.
Absolutely. I think it might say more about Van Gogh in the painting. But yes, he does play with proportions. He distorts and elongates the bed, but then that far wall really brings you right back into the foreground.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting composition. I think that's maybe why it's been such a fan favorite. All right, Connor, if you could go to the next one. Perfect. So within a month of living together, Van Gogh and Gauguin were arguing constantly. And one night, Gauguin walked out. Van Gogh followed him, and when Gauguin turned around, he says that he saw Van Gogh with a razor in his hand up to his ear. Gauguin at that point had absolutely as much of Van Gogh as he could handle, and he walked away. The police did find Van Gogh in his room the next morning, and of course he very famously cut off his ear. They admitted him to the hospital, and Theo actually arrived on Christmas Day to see Van Gogh, who was very weak from blood loss, and he was actually having violent seizures because he was drinking turpentine and eating paint. probably lead poisoning, mercury poisoning going along with it. The doctors did assure Theo that his brother would live and he would be very well taken care of. And by January 7th, Van Gogh was released from the hospital.
Okay.
He made a quick recovery, but he did remain alone and depressed. For hope, he turned to painting and nature, but he just could not find peace. And he self-admitted himself to the hospital again. He would actually paint at the Yellow House by day and return to the hospital at night for treatment.
Yeah. You know, I kind of admire that he knew that he needed to go back.
Yeah.
That took a lot of commitment on his part.
Yeah. So he was in a tough situation. Things were not going well. He was not well physically or mentally. And he decided to move to an asylum in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence. This was actually after the people of the town he was living in signed a petition saying that he was dangerous and asking him to leave. Yeah, that's a difficult thing to hear, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yes, but so by May 8th of 1889, he was in Provence and he was painting in the hospital gardens at the asylum. And things were starting to look up for Van Gogh, actually. By November 1889, he was invited to exhibit his paintings in Brussels. And he sent 6 paintings, including some of his most famous works. And I think this might actually be a good time to check back in with Ashley and see how she's going.
Okay. Well, I haven't started drinking turpentine yet, so that's a plus. That wasn't it. That was, I shouldn't have said that. All right. So here's what I've done. I'm trying to establish those dark black outlines. So I started off by painting my branches all black because I frankly don't have the time to go back and outline all of them. But when we look at more of his Japanese art here shortly, you'll see everything is very detailed and outlined in black. So you'll see that soon. Then I went back and I added just a little bit of kind of an army green, which is actually yellow and black together, kind of make that nice army green color. I'm trying to establish a little bit of like the bark, the layers of the bark. Also, now I'm starting to add my almond blossoms. I still have quite a ways to go before I get to here. But we'll see how I do. We'll see how it goes.
It's looking beautiful so far.
Well,
I am really impressed.
Like I said, no turpentine. So here we go.
You've had a short amount of time and you've made amazing progress.
Thank you.
That's wonderful.
I like you, Kate.
I like you too.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions, actually. We had some comments from Mary. She said, you know, how does he make the sunflowers look so real, especially the ones that have not opened up yet? And she was also wondering, the bedroom painting, the bedroom looks quite small. Was that sort of the size of how the rooms were in that time, or was that based on his mental status?
Well, a little bit of both, but mostly actually due to his financial status. Van Gogh did not really make any money of his own, and his brother Theo supported him financially. So he had pretty modest lodgings. Yeah.
Another point for Theo, though.
Another point for Theo, absolutely. And the sunflowers, how does he do it? That's a fantastic question. I wish I could paint like Van Gogh. But it's really a combination of his using the brush strokes and the thickness of the paint to give that sense of motion and movement and emotion and feeling to something as simple as a vase of flowers is really the core of the genius of Van Gogh. A lot of art makes us feel something, but Van Gogh really sort of takes us through the ringer in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know, blossoming flowers were actually among one of his favorite things to paint. He loved nature, and he is, for as melancholy and as sad and as depressed as he was, he found real joy and beauty in nature and in flowers specifically.
Yeah. He was deeply religious, but he's always said he felt God most in nature. So the fact that he felt sort of this connection to nature and flowers is not surprising at all. And Van Gogh failed at a lot of things, pretty much over and over and over, but he always sort of kept picking himself back up and had this hope within him that it does make sense to me that the blossoms would be something that would speak to him. That's sort of a visual representation of new hope blossoming. Yeah. All right.
And we had just one last comment. So Arlene said that she bought a print of the sunflowers when she traveled in Europe and gave it to her mom and framed it, and she has it now. So there's a lot of sentimentality and, you know, emotion tied to his work.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people feel a strong emotional connection to Van Gogh. Yeah. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Well, Connor, I think we can go back to the slideshow and then advance to the next one as well. Please. Thank you. Perfect. All right. So when he sent these 6 paintings to Brussels, one of them was what we see here, what everyone knows, what I'm wearing is Starry Night. And the other was Irises, which we will look at next, actually. So Starry Night is often considered to be Van Gogh's pinnacle achievement. Unlike most of his works, Starry Night was painted from memory and not out in the landscape. So this sort of emphasis on the interior emotional life of Van Gogh is very clear in this chaotic, swirling, tumultuous depiction of the sky. This is a radical departure from his previous, much more natural landscapes. The result of Starry Night that we have here is a landscape that is rendered through curves and lines, and it's seemingly chaos, sort of subverted by a very formal composition. The trees in the foreground, the small city down in the back, and then the horizon line coming across at the middle of the painting. Those are very classic formal compositions for a landscape, but it's certainly nothing classic about it. This is absolutely revolutionary at the time, really.
Now, he didn't love this painting, right?
It was not one of his favorites.
Isn't that shocking?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I don't know how you could look at that and not love it. I think that it fills just about everyone who sees it with some emotion. Yeah.
And also, this is just kind of a fun fact. I did read that it was the morning star that he particularly found captivating, which is kind of that bright spot that's not the moon. And an astronomer came back and said, well, that's Venus. That's actually what would have been in the sky at that time from where he was painting. So, occasionally we see a bright star and on the news we hear it's Venus. And next time that happens, you can look up and know that you're looking at the Starry Night that Van Gogh saw.
Or get your paints out and make your own.
I like that better. Yeah.
So Starry Night is really most famous for advancing painting beyond just the representation of a physical world. So we are seeing the internal feelings, emotions, thoughts of Van Gogh interpreted through a landscape, which was absolutely sort of revolutionary and just mind-blowing at the time. And Connor, if you could go to the next slide. Wonderful. So Irises from 1889 actually held the world record for most expensive artwork when it was sold in 1987. It sold for $53.9 million. Yeah, that would be about $100 million in today's money. So he was very inspired by the nature surrounding him. And he actually began his work on this painting within his first week at his stay in the asylum. This really does show his influence from the Japanese woodblock prints, the dark outlines of the flowers, the color blocking, so those sort of not blended colors, it's just a block of purple next to the block of green. That is very, very thematic, or a common artistic theme in woodblock prints, of course. And I find it pretty interesting about this painting as well. There are no known drawings of this piece. So often Van Gogh would do many, many drawings before he began a painting to sort of work out what he was going to do on the canvas. And we actually believe that there were no sketches of this because he did not consider this a masterpiece, but simply a study. Amazing. And it sold for $53.9 million. What a study that is.
Really? Boy.
I know. Will you go to the next slide, please? Connor, could you go to the next slide, please?
Yep, hold on 1 second. There we go.
We should have calculated how many, like hundreds of $1,000s per iris that was. I'll work on it for next time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get back to us.
Will do.
So here we have the Red Vineyard from 1888. I know we are going back in time a little bit with when he painted it, but this was actually the only painting that Van Gogh sold in his lifetime. So this was sold in 1890 on January 31st, right around when Theo and his wife Johanna gave birth to a baby boy and named him Vincent Van Gogh.
Yeah.
So that's the fourth Vincent. So at the same time that he had his brand new nephew, his very first painting sold ever. So things were really almost feeling positive, you would think, in Van Gogh's life. He sold this for 400 francs. This was actually created in a single day on November 5th, 1888. He painted this about 2 weeks after Gauguin arrived and joined him in Arles. And if you are a fan or familiar of Gauguin, you might really see how the very colorful works of Gauguin inspired this painting.
Absolutely.
Gauguin is no stranger of deep reds and ochres and burnt oranges, and you can really get a sense that he was inspired by Gauguin's color palette in this painting. And this, of course, was painted from a scene out in the rural area that he was living in the south of France during an evening walk through the vineyards. Van Gogh loved to go out into nature and also paint from memory. He felt that when he painted from memory, it gave it a more artistic look, however. So this is the one and only painting he ever sold within his lifetime. All right, Connor, the next one, please. So after Van Gogh left the asylum, he, in May 1890, traveled north to Auvers, which is just outside of Paris. This church at Auvers is one of the most well-known images from the last few months of his life. He really imbues the landscape with a sense of movement and emotion. He renders this scene with these contrasting, vivid colors and brush strokes that really lead you through the painting. So I mentioned earlier that Van Gogh felt most connected to God in nature and not in the buildings of man, as he has put it. So if we look at this church at Auvers, it's almost distorted. The perspective is definitely not quite right. And the paths on either side of the church lead you anywhere but the building.
Interesting.
Right? And if you also notice, the background behind the church is dark and foreboding almost. It looks like a stormy night.
Yeah, it really does.
But then we look at the foreground of the painting in the front. It's these almost acidic, bright greens and yellows, like it's the middle of the day. and cutting the scene directly in the middle on the horizontal horizon there is that dark shadow of the church, which
Wait a minute.
really, it doesn't make sense.
If the sun's on this side,
Exactly.
how?
The shadow is not matching up with the source of light in the painting. So it's almost like this heavy, shadowed building that almost looks a little spooky.
Yeah.
But just outside of it, we see a peasant walking along this bright, sunshiny daylight. So some people do feel that this might have really been showing the inner turmoil
Yeah.
in his mind and his sort of difficulties going on emotionally and with his mental illness. Yeah. So of course he was plagued by instability his entire life, but that did infuse his works with this very unique blend of charm and tension, which I find fascinating. All right, Connor, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So his brother Theo found a physician named Dr. Paul Gachet. He lived in Auvers, and he agreed to take Van Gogh on as a patient and also a tenant. So Van Gogh moved into a room that he rented from Dr. Gachet. And in Dr. Gachet, Vincent found a personal connection. He even wrote to his sister, "I have found a true friend in Dr. Gachet, something like another brother. So much do we resemble each other physically and also mentally." And I do see the physical resemblance.
I do. I'm slightly concerned about a doctor that he feels that he resembles mentally when he himself
Was so unstable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Van Gogh here, he depicts Gachet at a red table with yellow books, and that's a foxglove flower in the little vase in front. And we do see this sort of far away, 1,000-yard stare on Dr. Gachet, and a real sense of sadness that we don't know if that's Van Gogh reflecting his own mental state on Dr. Gachet, or if they were, in fact, really both melancholy sorts.
Yeah.
So Van Gogh actually wrote to his old friend Gauguin that he hoped this portrait would show the heartbroken expression of our time. I know.
Gosh.
Yes. So Van Gogh here has created a portrait that has resonated with viewers for decades and decades. And the intensity of the emotion that Van Gogh pours into each brushstroke is really what has made his work so compelling to viewers for countless years, inspiring countless artists and individuals. The most recent owner of this painting actually planned to be cremated along with the painting. Yes. Very lucky for us, his wishes were not honored.
Oh my gosh.
So we do still have the painting. Yeah.
Yikes.
But that's, a strong connection,
Yeah.
right?
Really?
That's incredible. All right, Connor, if you could go to the next slide. Okay. So Vincent Van Gogh, I think everyone knows he had a very tragic end. On July 27th, 1890, he went out to paint in the morning in the fields, and he carried a loaded pistol with him, and he shot himself in the chest. The bullet did not kill him right away. He was actually found bleeding in his room. We don't know how he got back to his room. Turned out Vincent was distraught about his future because earlier in the year, his brother had visited and spoke to him about needing to be a little more strict with his finances. And Vincent misunderstood and took that to mean that Theo was no longer going to support him or sell his art.
Oh.
Yeah. So Van Gogh was taken to a nearby hospital, And the doctor sent for Theo as quick as he could get there. He did arrive in time, and he found Vincent sitting up in bed with a pipe.
Of course.
The story goes that they talked all through the night, and Vincent Van Gogh did end up passing away in the arms of his brother, and he was only 37 years old. Yeah. And very sadly, Theo himself was suffering secretly from syphilis and died only 6 months after his brother. So the brother was actually buried in Utrecht, but his wife, who was also a devoted supporter of Vincent Van Gogh, eventually had Theo's body reburied next to Vincent's in 1914.
Well, that's a sweet ending.
It is.
Good.
So Connor, if you could go to the next slide, just so we can see a little bit more about Vincent Van Gogh's legacy.
Hold on one second.
Sure. So here we actually see, this is an immersive experience, that last slide that you can go to, and you can almost sort of walk into Vincent Van Gogh's paintings. It must be a real treat. So Theo's wife, Johanna, she then spent the rest of her life collecting as many of Van Gogh's paintings as she could. But she discovered that many had been destroyed or lost. Van Gogh's own mother had actually thrown away crates of his artwork. No. But she spent the remainder of her life tracking down as many of the estimated 900 paintings that Van Gogh did in the last 10 years of his life. So on March 17th, 1901, Johanna did display 71 of Van Gogh's paintings in Paris, and his fame exploded. He was a sensation on the Paris art world. And actually, Van Gogh's mother lived long enough to see her son become an artistic success.
That's wonderful.
It is. And of course, today, Vincent Van Gogh is considered one of the greatest artists in human history. And this is a view of actually the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam.
Yeah, I actually had the opportunity to go to this museum, and it was, I didn't realize how much talent he had until I could see them in person, because you can see every brush stroke and it's incredible. So consider myself very fortunate to have gone.
Definitely, I would love to have gone. And if you can go to the next slide, Connor, his legacy continues today. You can buy Lego art sets and make a Starry Night Lego set. And if you can go to the next one, I've got a few other funny things. There's a pretty funny mug with a broken handle, of course, sort of a play on the ear that he chopped off. And of course, you can buy sneakers and face masks and dresses that all show his wonderful talent and amazing skill.
All of those things. And, I have one more comment, Kate.
Yes.
And it's because I love Theo so much.
We all do.
His brother. I just love him.
Yeah.
And I have kind of a fun fact. Did you know that Theo loved prune juice?
What an odd thing to love.
I know. But because of that, they called him Gotta Go. On that note, we've got to go. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for joining us. We have here Ashley's beautiful masterpiece.
We did our best.
I think it's fantastic.
Maybe from a distance?
No, bring it closer. Bring it closer.
Oh, look, that almost.
I love it, Ashley. It's beautiful. You did a fantastic job.
We tried.
Under a lot of pressure, really.
I mean,
that wasn't too bad.
Not bad. I'll take it.
That's a beautiful piece. We have a couple questions if you both have time for that.
Of course. If I can.
Let's see. Someone asked, what was his longest time to complete a painting? And which one was it? Do you know?
That's a good question. I don't know which one was the longest, but I do know that Van Gogh was a very fast painter. Typically, a painting would take him maybe a day or two to actually complete, but it's no surprise, I think, that he would ruminate on a topic and do dozens and dozens of sketches and drawings and do the same painting many times. In fact, he would do copies of his own artwork just to practice. Yeah. So he was a very fast painter, but that's not to say that he didn't also obsess and maybe do a lot of sketches and studies. Yeah.
And if you want, there's actually multiple Starry Nights. So that's not Kate's dress is not the only one. If you want to go out there and investigate, there's more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ashley, we had Iris said that your painting is beautiful and you did a great job.
Thank you.
It
And
is.
then we had another question. I know, Kate, you might have said this at the beginning, but can you just remind folks where you got your dress?
Amazon, where everyone gets everything.
And we had a lot of folks who shared that they have seen some of his paintings at the National Gallery of Art, and then as well in New York and all of that. So we had a lot of folks who have been able to see his work in real life. And I've also been to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. It's really beautiful. Yeah, it's very beautiful. They have a great collection of a lot of his letters. I can't remember if it was between him and his brother, but they have a lot of letters there that you can read through, and they're really, really special. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, he wrote many, many, many letters. He was prolific. I mean, and he saved everything. He was a bit maybe OCD or man, I don't know. I'm not going to diagnose the poor man, but he saved all of his letters, and he just constantly wrote and wrote and wrote to everyone he knew and anyone who would listen.
And he's very self-deprecating in the letters, but he's also very funny. He has a lot of wit. So I would recommend reading some if you feel so inclined.
Yeah.
And the last thing I would just want to mention is that if anyone watching, we had a great audience today, almost just about 50 people. So that was wonderful. If anyone wants to receive their own complimentary paint kit, we will mail you a canvas as well as some paints that Kate and Ashley have picked out to paint this particular painting. So if you would like that, please write in the chat, or you can email me afterwards, and we'd be happy to get that to you sometime in the next week, so you can rewatch and follow again back at home. But I just want to give a big thank you to Ashley and Kate. You guys were fantastic. And we had a comment from someone in the audience that your conversational style was wonderful and they really enjoyed your presentation style. So keep it up.
I'm so glad, because sometimes I love art history, but it can be a bit dry. So we wanted to make sure it was fun and entertaining and exciting. So thank you so much for joining us.
It really was. As Stella said, this was an excellent talk. So we've gotten lots of good feedback.
Thanks, Stella.
I will let you get back with your day, but thank you so much. And if anyone has any questions or they'd like a paint kit, please feel free to email me afterwards if you don't get it in the chat in time. But thank you to Kate and Ashley, and we will see everybody next week, next Thursday. And our topic will be emotional wellness, and it'll be coping with COVID fatigue. I know it's been a long year, coming up on a year, since all of this started. So we hope you can join us then. And thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks.